So good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Here we are again with Sir Roland Lazenby. But this time, I have two of my regular friends in the world of basketball. First, we have Sir Henry Liao.
Good evening. Well, I think it's morning in your place, Roland.
Yes, it is, Henry.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, sir. I'm also a writer. I also write about,
Likewise.
so it is, and I think you're just 3 years older than me, so we're in the same bracket.
No mention of ages.
Yeah, but he looks like 40.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, right. Thank you. You're kind.
And of course, the
But we
person,
both know the truth.
and also we have Aldrin Magnaye, 3B Hoops. He's the one who really wanted this interview at the first place, Sir Roland. Aldrin?
Hello, good evening, and good morning, Sir Roland. And now people will know who is behind all of my NBA stories and NBA profile.
Yeah. He does the good YouTube stuff, Sir Roland. You have to check him out.
I will. I will. Please send me a link.
Yeah.
But there's no subtitle yet, Sir Roland. So let me check on the other side, sir, if I can make something.
Okay, so let's start it off. Let's start with Aldrin because he's the one who really wanted to talk to you, Sir Roland. Aldrin, go ahead.
Actually, Sir Roland, I make some videos about Michael Jordan, and then I remember when I'm working on a publishing company, one of your book has been converted to a ebooks. Then there is one excerpt there that I wrote the title. I don't remember exactly. There's a book titled "Blood on the Horn." I think that is the Michael Jordan's.
Right.
Is that correct, sir? The Michael Jordan books. One of the excerpts, sir, there is one excerpt. You can preview the whole book in, I think, 30 seconds or 30 or 1 minute. 1 minute. There is an excerpt there that you on that specific book you can read the Michael Jordan play a long time with Scottie Pippen and other player with the Bulls because Michael Jordan is the most demanding player in the NBA on that time. So would like to know some other stories that not yet revealed on the other media. Sometimes on the books is different on the internet, but I want to know the real story about MJ on that time.
Well, The Last Dance documentary, which has been seen all over the world, was based on the 1997-98 season. And I was there covering the Bulls, traveling with them to write Blood on the Horns. I had already written several other books about them, including the team history of the Bulls. And, heading into that season, that summer before, I also edit Lindy's Pro Basketball Annual. Here's a copy
Oh,
of the
yes,
covers
yes.
of this year's magazine. Well, back in the summer of 97, I've been editing Lindy's for 27 years. And back in the summer of 1997, Bill Smith, the team photographer, told me, man, you would not believe what went on the Bulls bus during the 97 playoffs, during the finals in Utah. And Michael and Scotty wouldn't drink a lot, but they didn't have to drink a lot. It would affect them. They'd smoke the big victory cigars and after the games and drink some beers on the bus. And Michael began taunting the general manager, Jerry Krause. It was very disrespectful, but also very funny. And the things he was saying, Michael had this very cutting sense of humor, and he sort of used it. And this is the scenario that is part of Blood on the Horns. And it really was left out of The Last Dance because Michael controlled that. But the reason that Jerry Krause came in that fall of 1997 and said, Phil is done. I don't care. I don't care if he wins 82 games. He's not coaching this team after this season. And Jerry Krause was so furious that Phil Jackson would sit there on that bus with Michael saying all these things and humiliating him, and that Phil did nothing to stop it. And of course, the players said, well, Phil did look back at Michael and Scotty sitting in the back of the bus as if to say, pipe it down. But Phil didn't have that kind of power. That's not how, it's not like a high school team or a college team even. It was a pro basketball team. Michael Jordan was obviously the most powerful person in pro basketball at the time. And, Phil had played a role. He had really sort of used the players' dislike of Jerry Krause to motivate that team. But that whole scene in 1997, while they were winning the championship in Utah, they had to go through the Utah mountains back to Park City to where they were staying in the hotel, the Bulls did. And the bus would strain on the steep highways. And Michael would be sitting at the back and he'd say, yeah, Jerry, this bus is struggling with your fat ass on it. Things like that. Or, he would say, Jerry Krause, let's go fishing. Don't worry, if we don't catch anything, you can just eat the bait yourself. And just different things like that. And at first, as many of the players would explain, they would laugh because, well, he was Michael Jordan and he was very funny. But they were all nervous about laughing too loud. One, there was Jerry Krause, the GM who controlled their future. But there was also Michael Jordan. If you laughed too loud, he would look over at you and go, oh, what are you doing? And he would turn that humor on one of his teammates. And it was, in some ways, typical locker room stuff, except that it involved the general manager. But the really big thing about it was the thing that ended after one more season, the run of the Chicago Bulls. And in that regard, what has never been brought into focus, that Jordan's excess on the back of that team bus was one of the really, really, really big reasons that the Chicago Bulls' great team was over.
Roland, may I ask, I'm sure you saw it firsthand, right? The Bulls championship season 98, which was the basis of the Last Dance. I'd like to ask you truthfully, how much is that the Last Dance? How much was it fact and how much was it a myth? Because at that time you knew beforehand, before the season, they were documenting this season, perhaps for later presentation or whatever. So how much of is it fact and how much is it myth? Because a lot of the personages there are complaining also it was not truthful. So may I know your opinion on that?
I don't think that there was, and I have to frame this first, because so much of sports media, sports writing, sports commentary dips into mythologizing about athletes. The greater they are, whether it's the great Babe Ruth playing baseball in America, or Anytime some player or coach does unusual things, I think the great Tim Cone in the Philippines, I know him as just a great guy. But when you have someone win championship after championship after championship, the mythologizing begins. And we're all human. But sports figures, and it can end. You can be mythologized, and then just as quickly you can fall off the pedestal, and the people who are singing your praises are calling you a chump. And so this documentary, obviously, just the scope of it, all of this in some ways is outsized, obviously, and it lends itself to that mythologizing of Michael Jordan. On the other hand, I was there, and it was the most exciting time in my life in so many ways. And the reason it was the most exciting was that here was Michael Jordan, and I had been through a lot. He'd been through watching him just those years. He'd been through the murder of his father. He came back to the game very angry. He had been through baseball. He had taken on the great impossible challenge of trying to become a Major League Baseball player. And so the reporting, the media community covering him wasn't given to really being tough on him. He changed everyone's lives. He sold all the newspapers. He made people watch all the TV shows. He set his own agenda. And so it was very powerful. It's hard not to mythologize in those circumstances. And the toughest thing I had to do once I knew what he had done to Krause on that team bus, I had to figure out how I was going to ask him about that. How do you ask the great Jordan about the kinds of things you were doing? And I thought, well, what I'll do to get him talking, I'll talk about his sense of humor, how powerful it is. And he uses it to really enforce the roster. Just like we're watching LeBron James work on Russell Westbrook right now with the Lakers, really trying to get him ready to be a part of this championship run. Jordan was all over the place, all over his teammates. And I wanted to set it up to talk about, you use this really tough sense of humor to police the team. And Jordan liked that question. I think he obviously wanted to talk about it. And he immediately admitted, he said, I can be hard. I'm a very hard guy. Get on that team bus, I will zing anybody. He was talking in that nature. But he said, I don't do it just to be cruel or just to be nasty. Or he says, I really do it because I have to find out what they can take. Now, some people accept that, some don't. You're putting pressure and humiliating a teammate on the team bus helps you determine, as he said, if they could handle the pressure on the floor. And I think there's some real truth in what Jordan said, but I also think there's some real questions to be asked about it. And I know that's a very long answer for all of this, but it's sort of the heart of the issue. And I have great appreciation for The Last Dance. The director credited both of my books, Blood on the Horns and Michael Jordan, The Life, as being his Bibles for doing the whole docuseries. But there's no question, I pissed Michael Jordan off immensely in writing Michael Jordan, The Life, because I called him to task on some of the things he did as a human being. And I think that you have to put some of the difficulties about the Bulls, you have to lay that at his feet too. And but I said in Blood on the Horns, they were all responsible for the breakup of the Bulls. But they were all very hard driving men and accomplished. And in some ways, there's always a tug of war over who gets credit for what happens.
Hello, Sir Roland. I think this is the best time to answer. To ask this question, sir, because there is a rumors here in the Philippines. I think I'm sixth grade. It always been a rumors. A myth. I don't know if you can if you will answer this, because in the finals before his Michael Jordan father's death, there is a rumors that someone asked MJ to put down a game. So if that not happen, then the prize is the life of his father. So any rumors in the US about that time, that is there any connection with the organization to ask MJ to put down a championship game and then the prize is the life of his father?
I've never heard that rumor. I do know, and I've written a lot about all of the gambling rumors. And I tend to discount such stuff. For example, I don't think Jordan was suspended from the NBA for gambling. I don't believe that. The evidence doesn't show that. I was there. The NBA, on the other hand, has a long history with gambling issues, and it's very serious about it. One of my things is that no one at any time, in all the talk about his gambling over the decades, and talk is so cheap. Talk is the cheapest thing on the internet. It is so cheap. And anybody sitting around smoking a joint, I don't care wherever they are, they could be in Latvia smoking a joint, and they suddenly get some fantastical idea. And so they're just stoned, and they're high, and they put something on the internet, and it doesn't take any time for things to travel. So I've been a newspaper reporter before I do this. I covered crime and courts. I was a pretty serious dude about information. And I try to look people in the eye. I try to get around to asking the right questions, and I document things and throw it on the hump, and I look closely at the evidence. I don't just look at what people say, but I look at what they do. And I will acknowledge that there is an underworld out there that is certainly intersected with all sports around the globe here and there on occasion. And we now live in an age, and something like that today could happen now, because every news broadcast, everything going on in America is now all about gambling. It used to be that the NBA and all the pro sports leagues and colleges, that because of the scandals in America in the 1950s, incredible scandals that touched on the best teams throwing games, because those scandals were such a threat to the game, man, there was every kind of effort. They went after everybody. But in the last couple of years, all of that mindset's gone. They used to have watchdogs everywhere, and they probably still do because of the potential to destroy the games with the influence of gambling on the outcome. But you know, the main thing about Jordan and gambling, and it's no question that he gambled on all kinds of things. He obviously bet tremendously on golf.
Yeah.
And that led to all of this hoopla over him gambling, the golf betting. But I pointed out that since 1946, when the NBA began, back then the players were riding around on trains. They didn't really fly to games. They loaded up on trains. So before they were gambling on airplanes, and by gambling, I mean playing poker with each other or tonk or whatever, before they were doing that gambling, they were gambling on trains. And throughout all the 1940s and 50s and 60s, now occasionally you'd have maybe Elgin Baylor on the Lakers plane winning money from the coaches. And the general manager might get a little nervous and say, look, you got to stop all that gambling on the plane. You're taking all the money from my coaches, or whatever could happen. And so the NBA has always been a gambling environment. But those people like Pete Rose in American baseball, or all of the college players from the great University of Kentucky teams that were caught gambling in the early 50s, or City College of New York. They had these great national championship college teams where some of the players were caught shaving points. Or you had a figure like Jack Molinas, who was caught shaving points in the NBA in the 1950s and then turned around. He was a brilliant man, played at Columbia in the Ivy League. He turned around and spent all his time in getting college kids and, to throw games later. And he was assassinated. He was shot to death. Jack Molinas was in LA. So there are these episodes, but no one ever anywhere with any credibility has ever said or even alleged that MJ bet on games or shaved points or threw games. It's not a credible thing. Can I say for certain that such a thing did not happen? No, that's always the tough thing about fantastic scenarios in conspiracy theories. People sit around dreaming up things that would make great plots for movies. But that's just not been part of the stream of information happening. Michael Jordan's father was murdered by those two guys. The evidence was overwhelming. When you add murder and gambling and they intersect at a close time around a famous figure such as MJ, it doesn't take much for that stuff to go off the rails.
Actually, Sir Roland, one question, last question for me for Michael Jordan. I made this one episode also, the conspiracy about the flu game. Before the night of that flu game, some articles wrote that MJ, someone tried to poison MJ just not to play that game, that flu game. It's not really a flu because they tried to poison MJ by delivered pizza. I don't know if it's that a conspiracy or a true story.
Did he drink too much? Was he poisoned? I ate some bad pizza last night. At least I think it was the pizza. I have no idea why I feel bad today. How can any one of us at any time? What we do know is MJ was weak. You know, it also had a game where the guy switched, where the assistant, the locker room assistant, the Bulls used to drink Gatorade on the bench, and they had to hide it because the league had a contract with another drink manufacturer. But there was also this product called Gator Load, which was for loading carbohydrates for training. And it was so dense, it was like eating a baked potato. Well, during the finals, the locker room assistant iced down Gator Load, and the Bulls actually, according to Chip Schaefer, lost one of the games against Utah from drinking Gator Load. And so that's, I have that on recording from Chip Schaefer, the trainer. As for MJ's flu game, you know, one of the broadcasters thought he was merely hungover. It's really hard to know. You can pick something like that, and that's easy territory for a conspiracy. What we do know is that MJ was very sick in that game, and he played through it. You know, Kobe Bryant had his own flu game in high school, long before he was drinking beer or any of that, and he played through a flu game. I believe it was at a tournament in South Carolina. I could be wrong, but competitors do things like that. And of course, Jordan and Kobe both, they played through all kinds of energies that were always stopping other players. And so, again, I just deal with the facts that I can gather, the things that are, you know, they have to make sense. You have to think about it. We can get suspicious of all kinds of things, but it's open-ended. It was called the flu game. Things get seized up and become mythology. I just sort of had fun with it by quoting the broadcaster saying maybe he was hungover. But I didn't pass that off as some kind of certifiable truth. There are things, you know, that are just too routine, like stomach distress or you know, some kind of food poisoning. We don't know, but those things affect us. And so, but we can't always ascertain what they are. I hear a young Jordan fan in the background there.
I think that's Sir Henry.
No.
That's great. I have three grandkids.
I was wondering, you've covered Michael Jordan, you've covered Kobe Bryant, right? In fact, I have
Yes, sir.
one of your books, The Mad Game. No, I've been reading since I was a kid.
Thank you.
You know, Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe. Then you have
Great guy.
Jim Murray from the LA Times. So I've been reading a lot of books.
I've seen him work, but when I was out there, Jim Murray, but he was a god.
Yeah, that shows you how old we are. No, we're 40.
Right.
Yeah, we're just 40. I was asked, they say the closest to Michael Jordan was Kobe Bryant in terms of basketball play. What I wanted to do is what did Michael Jordan have that Kobe didn't have, and what did Kobe have that Michael didn't have, and what's their commonality between the two great players?
Well, you know, I was very good friends with Tex Winter. He helped my career tremendously. I could have conversation like we're talking now. Tex used not on Zoom, it wasn't around, but we would talk on the phone a lot. And we would talk in person before and after games. after practices, whenever, and Tex was always available to me. He was a great guy. And so we talked about this a lot. And of course, the Bulls coaches talked about it a lot. And the similarities, of course, they're both two attacking players who could play either the off guard or the small forward position. And playing in the triangle, that was a very structured offense, as everyone in the Philippines knows. And you could put MJ or Kobe on the wing on the weak side of the triangle, and they could attack, and it made it very hard to double team an attacking player like that. So the similarity was that they played for the same coaches. They were athletic players who could attack off the dribble. They were both tremendously determined, both possessed of this incredible iron will. But when the coaches looked at the differences, the very first thing for Tex Winter was that MJ played 3 years of college. Not only did he play 3 years of college, but he played 3 years of college at the University of North Carolina. Not only was he at Carolina, but he was playing for Dean Smith, who was what Tex Winter called a system basketball coach. The great Jim Cone is a system basketball coach. He has coached in the Philippines for years with the wonderful system. The game's rules have changed now. You can't play system basketball like you used to. But Michael Jordan also on that team, they didn't run the triangle at the University of North Carolina, but Tex Winter ran the triangle at Kansas State, and his point guard in the triangle was a guy named Bill Guthridge, who went on to be Tex Winter's assistant coach at Kansas State running the triangle. And then Bill Guthridge ended up at North Carolina as Dean Smith's top assistant. Dean Smith didn't run the triangle, but they had all of the principles and ideas of a structured offense in place. The NBA scouts used to complain that they couldn't tell how good the North Carolina players were because they were in such a structured offense. And this was true of Jordan, too. You couldn't really see all their athleticism and all the things they could do. Now, so Kobe didn't have the benefit of that. He came right out of high school where he dominated his high school program. And that made for tremendous difficulty because he was, and he came in the league. Adidas paid him all this money to turn pro. They'd never done that for an American teenager. And he came in the league. It was all stone-faced older men. He was so out of place with the Lakers, and he had all this ambition. He had all this athleticism. He put all the pressure on his veteran teammates. And there was a dislike that developed pretty quickly between this precocious Kobe Bryant and his veteran teammates. Jordan came in, a much older, wiser player, but bam, he did the same thing. He embarrassed his teammates in practice. But Jordan had all of that background that Kobe did not have. And Jordan had larger hands. Jordan was stronger holding position in post. But now the other thing is that in the triangle offense, Phil Jackson allowed Jordan to do all kinds of things that he would not allow Kobe to do. And Kobe knew the offense, and he was frustrated that Phil Jackson was holding him back. But Phil Jackson's very much a hierarchy guy. Who's the top dog? Well, in Chicago, there was no question who the top dog was, Michael Jordan. But on that team in LA with Shaquille O'Neal and a young Kobe Bryant, Phil Jackson chose the hierarchy of Shaquille O'Neal, as I don't know, every coach would. But that created a lot of conflict, lots and lots of conflict, obviously, as we know from that era. But that's sort of a breakdown. As far as the two men go, I had the great benefit of going back and forth between them. For example, Kobe would say, I told him I was going to see Michael at his golf tournament. And Kobe said, I'd like to ask him about math. And what Kobe meant was, I want him to teach me how to be a volume scorer. There are secrets he knows to, how many points you get in the first, over 4 quarters of an NBA game. How do you fit in to start scoring 30 and 35 and points a game? And so Jordan laughed when I asked him that, and he said, I can teach him about math. And they had that relationship. In 2008, I was interviewing Jordan. We were sitting together down in Orlando during the pre-draft camp up in the top of the arena. And it was great that Michael had given me this time just to talk to him. And Kobe, of course, was going through what would become his MVP season. He was playing very well. And that's when Michael, and it was obvious all the respect Michael had for Kobe. And Michael had said Kobe was the player who had done all the work and had, he was really impressed with Kobe. And then I went out to LA. The Lakers were in the playoffs. And I was sitting in the locker room in one of the chairs. And Kobe was caddy cornered a little bit across the locker room. I said, Kobe, and he was tying his shoes. I said, Kobe, I've been talking to Mike. And he goes, what, talking to Mike? And he lit up like a 12-year-old kid, and that was sort of that big brother relationship they had. You could see it, and it was special. So that's sort of my recounting of that.
Yeah, thank you, Roland.
Sure, Henry.
Aldrin, you have a question?
Actually, I'm being shocked with that. Teach Kobe how to do math. So that's why he became a volume shooter on that 2006, 2005, 6 and 7. So just a question on that time frame on 2000 until 2003, the three-peat of the Bulls. The Bulls with the Lakers. If Shaquille O'Neal is not on that team, 2000 or 2003, will Kobe become Michael Jordan at that time, adding the championship?
Well, if you recall his first 7 years in the league, Michael Jordan was fantastic, but the narrative was that he couldn't win any of the big games. They did not have success. Michael was crying on the back of the team. But I used to travel with the Pistons. I did their guidebooks every season. And I covered those playoffs while traveling with the Pistons. And there was Michael crying on the back of the team bus until he got into that structured offense. And, the triangle was deployed to allow the Bulls coaches to control tempo in the game, and then turn it over to Jordan in the key moments. That wasn't going to happen. And the reason they call it the triangle, Tex Winter always called it the triple post offense. And of course, the great post weapon for the Bulls was Michael Jordan. The great post weapon for those championship Lakers was not Shaquille O'Neal. Now, when I was dealing with Kobe as a young player, Larry Drew, the assistant coach, a former Laker himself, kept telling me, man, you got to see Kobe in the post. This dude's got all of Michael's moves in the post. But guess what? The Lakers had a very big other factor in the post. Now, in the NBA today, we see all the bigs, they've put them out on the perimeter. They're shooting threes, but, the NBA threw away the post game. about starting in 2015. They adopted Mike D'Antoni's beliefs. As Tim Cohn explained, they basically eliminated the triangle. First, they cut the timeline down to 8 seconds from 10. Then on the reset of the shot clock on an offensive rebound, instead of another 24 seconds to run the triangle, they went to 14. But when Kobe and Shaq were winning, all of those things were in effect. And it was very fraught. Kobe's ambition was a big problem, but it was a big blessing too. You know, that's just how it goes. That is the reality of competition. And Kobe was learning. He was a magnificent factor in winning those championships, but an even more magnificent factor was Shaquille O'Neal. Now, they were both very immature. Shaquille has admitted he was immature in the stuff he would do in the locker room and the jealousies he developed. And he basically put Kobe on an island. And Kobe put himself there too, isolated from teammates, sort of a joke. And all of that emotion from all those things ended up, the coaches were stunned that they won that first championship in 2000. And, you know, that was an amazing thing, that comeback against Portland in the playoffs. But that was the first step in those guys learning how to play. But those 3 seasons you cited, Kobe had it in his mind. He wanted to run the thing himself. And the narrative of Kobe Bryant's life is that he just about destroyed his career with his demands to be the man. And the first time I began talking to him as a rookie, we would have phone conversations, and he would tell me, I just want to be the man. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And by the man, he wanted to be the man in the NBA. And here's a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid saying this. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there. And so those things, that ambition was huge and very important. But that Ringo Starr did a song, an American pop song called it Don't Come Easy.
Yeah.
And I think that certainly applies to just the basic understanding of why Michael and Kobe are such an interesting comparison, and why Kobe's relationship with Shaq was always problematic.
Sir Roland, you mentioned you talked Kobe in his rookie season. There is one story, I watched this, I think, way back high school or grade school again, grade 6 maybe. There is two version of the story on his first rookie season. They said the team initiate him to do something like, the initiation with the rookies with the NBA. On the first story, I watched it, and the teammate asked Kobe to bring their bags to the airplane, but Kobe refused. And then now when I'm looking on the internet, Kobe, the teammate of Kobe on that time, asked him to buy donuts midnight and go to the airplane. That's Kobe is really cold. But I don't know what is the real story about Kobe on that rookie season, that he's really don't like being being treated like a kid, or just following the rule of the NBA with an initiation with the rookies.
Well, Kobe played obviously in Europe when his father went there to play basketball in the European leagues, mostly in Italy. And it was evident almost from the start. Kobe dominated those European teams. He was above his teammates. They loved playing with him, but when you play basketball and you got one guy dominating everything, ultimately it's not much fun. And Kobe, don't get me wrong, he learned the language. I talked to his teammates, a couple of them from that era. They loved him, but it wasn't easy. And so then he would come to Philadelphia in the summers. He's 10, 11, 12, and Philadelphia's a tough town. A lot of street basketball, a lot of hard guys. A lot of those guys didn't have an NBA player as a father. Kobe Bryant, people have to remember, was a rich man's son. There are the sons of rich men that have had impressive tenures in American basketball. Grant Hill comes to mind. His father was a National Football League player. And we're seeing more and more of that now as we're getting into generations. And, we do see the sons, but Kobe Bryant was one of those first guys in a lot of ways. And Joe Bryant himself, Kobe's father, Jelly Bean, suffered from confidence issues. Jelly Bean was a fantastic player, but he was a goofball. And and Kobe's mother was a very tough lady. She was raised by a well-to-do Philadelphia family. Her father was a fire department officer. They were not lacking for money. They had social status. And so there was a haughtiness and arrogance in Kobe. And in Philly, in those summer leagues when he'd come back, there was always some conflict. And of course, Kobe had knee problems as an adolescent, 12, 13. He would wear knee pads. And he looked almost like a space alien. One of the guys who played against him then and who played a lot against him during those years. And then he went into AAU ball, and teams are trying to win, and Kobe's more interested in working on his crossover than winning the game. And, the other guys in the AAU team were trying to get scholarships. And Kobe's sort of sailing along to his own wind. He already knows he's going to be an NBA player. And he was the same way with his high school team. So, he's not the kind of guy you're going to ask to go get donuts. He probably should have done more of that. I remember when I was 15, I had to unstop sewers for the town of Whitfield. I was working on the sewer and water crew. That's probably the most important chapter in my own life. Because, and maybe Kobe didn't need any humility. But I think that maybe a little humility might have allowed him to avoid all that heartache from Colorado. I don't know. When we know none of these things, we're into speculation.
Hello, sir. Again, Sir Roland, we mentioned again Kobe. Sorry, I think this is my last question, sir, because I'm really happy on this moment, sir. Because on the time on 1993, the last championship of MJ for the first three-peat, he retires. Then the NBA looking for a new replacement for MJ that time. 1996, Kobe came in the league. On that time frame, in the middle, Rockets win, Olajuwon dominate the league. But there is one NBA player that many people think to be the next Michael Jordan, and that is Grant Hill. So, do you think Grant Hill will be next to MJ, not Kobe, if he doesn't have an injury on that early part of his career?
Grant Hill was a different player. He now MJ played point guard, obviously, at one point for the Bulls under Doug Collins. But Grant Hill was more of a, I mean, he had all the athleticism and could do the stuff, but you know, he had played a lot of point guard or facilitator at Duke University. He was a different player. He had a little bit of Magic Johnson in him. He could see the floor, and so that's just a different thing. Grant Hill was a different player. They were always trying to take somebody, one of these players that comes along, and you know, anybody who could dunk in a flashy manner was suddenly going to be the next Jordan there for a while. I think Sam Smith wrote a book a couple years back, a little paperback called "There Is No Next," which was about there was not another Jordan. And for all the similarities between Kobe and Michael, you could argue that there hasn't been another. That, you know, when Sonny Vaccaro with Adidas offered Kobe those millions to turn pro in high school, and everyone thought that with Kobe being the son of a rich man, that his family didn't need the money, but his family spent a lot of money, and once he quit playing pro basketball, they were very quickly in financial straits. And so Kobe had turned to Sonny Vaccaro on the day in the spring of his senior year of high school when he signed that contract with Adidas that ended his amateur status. He was naive about it. He looked at Sonny Vaccaro, and Sonny Vaccaro told me this himself. He said, "Mr. Vaccaro, is there any way that I can sign this contract and my parents can have this money and I can go play college basketball?" And of course, the main thought is he wanted to go to Duke and play for Coach K. And, you know, Tex said the major difference between Kobe and Michael was that Michael played college basketball for 3 years, as I've said. And to me, that is the sad moment in Kobe's life where no matter how hard he tried, he was never going to have that. And greatness is a thing that is perceived. It's not something we can measure. That's why all these internet people get us all arguing over who's the greatest. You can't answer that question. I don't get near it. But it cost Kobe this, in the perception that he could or would be the greatest. He was always the best guy trying to be next. And I think all of that's unfair. There are a lot of similarities. Kobe traveled a lot of the same path as MJ. That wasn't something he set up. But when they came to him, when Sonny Vaccaro with Adidas came to Kobe as a 15-year-old kid, or Kobe came to him, Sonny'd never heard of him. But when he saw him at Sonny's event, Sonny said, he was looking for the next Jordan. He said, "That's him." And Sonny Vaccaro told that to Kobe's AAU coach, Sam Rhines. You can imagine telling a 15-year-old kid he's the next Jordan. He starts acting like he shaved his head, started affecting the talk, a little bit of the walk. That's just natural. But the thing that really mattered is he had already studied all the tapes as he had of everyone else, and he already had a lot of the moves down pat.
Okay. So Henry, any questions on your end?
Nothing that, maybe I'd just like to comment because Kobe was really very popular in the Philippines because he had come to the Philippines so many times, I think 6 or 7 times, and very charismatic, no, at least to the Filipino public, no. So maybe Michael has hasn't come to the Philippines. I wonder why. Is it about the maybe the money or something? He has never
Well,
come to the Philippines.
the shoe industry obviously changed with Michael. It blew up. No one knew it was
Yes.
going to be like that. And he made some trips overseas, and Nike set up things for him to do. But that's still all of that marketing and development was coming along with MJ. His presence blew up the sneaker world. And the deal that Adidas gave him, Adidas tried to get rid of MJ. It was like putting out those Jordan shoes was really high stakes gambling. But they couldn't get rid of him because they'd already given him that percentage that they'd never given another player. They basically were, with that first contract, had made a mistake, or what appeared to be a mistake. They had locked him in forever. Kobe, on the other hand, Adidas was very aggressively trying to grow. Sonny Vaccaro had been fired by Nike, by Phil Knight, the head of Nike. He had fired Sonny Vaccaro under mysterious reasons. Sonny, for all Sonny's told me, he's never discussed with anyone why that happened. But Sonny was determined to get vengeance. He also wanted vengeance against the NCAA. So he wanted to take the greatest amateur basketball player he could find and steal him from the NCAA, which is the governing body of college basketball in America. And he wanted to steal him from Nike. And Kobe became that guy. And of course, they paid Kobe millions. Not only did they pay him millions, they were marketing the heck out of Kobe. And this was all new territory. And so, I remember doing I had to interview Tracy McGrady in China. One of these big investor guys out of Boston called me. It may have been 30 years ago. Probably somewhere around about 27, 30 years ago. And after I did that Tracy McGrady interview, he called me and he wanted to know, obviously basketball was going to grow tremendously in Asia. And they knew that. And all the people who were projecting the future were saying Asia. But this guy was looking at India because, India's got this immense population. And they said, they were studying, the reason they were talking to me, I'm just some old dumb sports writer. I didn't know. But he was explaining to me and I found it fascinating. But they were studying, can we get basketball? Can we make people in India really, really, really excited about basketball? Well, 30 years later, we can say a little bit, nothing like what was already going on in the Philippines, what would happen through much of Asia. And so suddenly, once Jordan had shown all of these money type people what could happen globally, let's face it, nobody gave a hoot about American basketball for the longest time. I got involved in the late 80s, even with Magic and Larry goosing the game up. People didn't give much of a hoot. My Kobe book got nominated for top sports biography in the UK, and I went over there to the awards ceremony. I didn't give a shit about basketball in London. Basketball has grown. Asia has been a tremendous partner in the global growth of basketball. And so once that all that money was being made on MJ, and here's Adidas, and they signed Tracy McGrady right after Kobe. If you've signed somebody and you're going to sell shoes, you're going to the big market. And of course, the market in America is big, but you want all the big markets. You want Asia, you want the Philippines. And so that was all business decision. Now, MJ had incredible charisma. He did not show that, Kobe had an arrogant side, and MJ had one too, but Kobe had one that people saw. He was young. And that ticked off a lot of people. And the way Adidas handled Kobe ticked off a lot of fans, a lot of basketball people in America. But Kobe individually, when I got to know him as an 18-year-old, he had his own charm already. As a person, now he could be icy cold dealing with teammates, but Kobe was an engaging guy. Larry Drew, the assistant coach who had him in summer league in LA right before his rookie year, said Kobe was like a puppy let out of a box. And he was. And so he had an ability to be respectful. He understood. He was unlike just about every other American basketball player. He already had a background in international basketball. And so Kobe went to Asia in a very respectful manner. And Kobe, I would consider Kobe's reception in Asia similar to his reception in Los Angeles. Jerry Buss loved him from that first summer league at Cal State LA. Jerry Buss, the Lakers owner, loved him. Lakers fans, they packed the building, and nobody went to those summer league games back then. But Kobe was the kid. He had that charisma. And they have a statue of him in China. Well, they have statues of a lot of people in China. But pretty good stuff. The game of basketball was invented at the School for Christian Workers in Springfield, Massachusetts, in 1891 by Dr. James Naismith. And they were training YMCA secretaries at the School for Christian Workers. These were people who were going to then fan out after graduation and go run YMCAs, which stands for Young Men's Christian Association. They're going to run YMCAs all over the world. Within 2 months of graduating in 1891, there were young YMCA secretaries in China setting up the game. Asia came very early to basketball. It runs deep in Asian culture. Now, there are a lot of things that run deep in Asian culture. It's complex and wonderful and just such a part of the human fabric. And that's particularly true with basketball. And Kobe understood that.
Aldrin, do you have any more questions, or should we go to the hottest recent ones?
Sorry, sir. It's good for me, sir. I already asked the
All right.
question that boggling my mind through the years, sir.
All right. Okay, Sir Roland,
Great to talk. Thank you.
let's forward to what the latest happenings in the NBA right now. What's your take on Kyrie Irving?
People die from not being vaccinated. America is the land of individual freedom. But I grew up in a small town that was hit badly by polio right before I was born. I had an older sister who died at birth. because and there were lots of children that died in the polio epidemic. And of course, soon along came the inoculation from Dr. Jonas Salk. It doesn't get any more serious than people dying. I don't speak out about it, but my attitude, I admire Kyrie's basketball skills. I consider him a major flake. Now, I'm a bit flaky myself, so I'm not trying to throw off on him. But get the damn vaccine, man. People are dying.
Well, the move. What can you say about the move of the Brooklyn Nets?
I think that they had to preserve. I mean, it is basketball. That's their business.
Mm-hmm.
They had to preserve the team. If you hitch yourself to Kyrie's flaky wagon, I think the Celtics showed us that you can get dragged all over the lot trying to cater to a free spirit and a flaky soul such as Kyrie Irving. And so I just, I don't think there's any coach in basketball. Now, the pro coaches in America, the players now have the power, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. And coaches have a much more tenuous power, as do general managers. LeBron's probably one of the most powerful people in the NBA right now. And he has wielded that power pretty daggone well. He's wielded that power as well, probably, as most people in basketball history of those who have power. Because there are a lot of people who have not wielded it well, team owners and whatnot. But I admire what the Nets did. I don't think they had a choice. And I think the other players on that team, they got close to winning a championship last year. They did not have the health to do that. And so I don't think they want another year to go by. If you're going to be a great pro player and you care about that, the last thing you want to do is to waste the season.
And I remember you when we last talked, we were talking about chemistry and Kevin Durant needing support. And this is not the kind of support he needs right now.
No, a lot of my life is based on personal allegiance, friendship, family. I actually think that's a secret to a lot of the global conflict we have. I look at race. I have deep personal allegiance to people. They've just been great friends in my life of various races. You just don't violate personal allegiance. And I think that's a guiding principle. And you have to be lucky to run into people who, a friend is a precious thing. And so Kyrie and KD, Kevin Durant, are said to be great personal friends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an ad campaign in America. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. But NBA relationships are different. I would say the common phrase for them probably is friends don't let friends miss the opportunity at championships.
There are ramblings right now. Should the Nets trade, or is it wise trading?
I think that depends on what's offered.
Mm-hmm.
That really comes down to what you want on your team. That I just don't think Kyrie's possessed of a lot of personal allegiance. I don't know what the allegiance those other two guys, Harden and Durant, are, what their allegiance is to him now. You can rupture friendships. Now, if they have tremendous allegiance to him, hell, they'll put up with it and wait for him to come around, I guess. But I think that if you were just calling it straight up in terms of basketball, and suddenly a lot of offers come in that are absolutely fantastic, then you look at that. Now, let's face it, there are not going to be a lot of offers for a goofball like Kyrie. I don't think anybody's going to offer a lot of value, except that other issue you're going to ask me about, which is the Philadelphia 76ers. And if they somehow work out a trade for those two guys, you know, that they both have troubled situations that they might be able to work out. Who knows? I don't know. It'll be interesting. That's why we all pay attention, I guess. This silly drama gets us all. You know, it doesn't take much. It is part of the competition, obviously.
Sir Roland knows me so too well how I ask my questions. But before I go to that, Sir Henry, would you want to chime in anything or add anything to that?
I just want to ask you from that standpoint of a writer, no? I'm also a writer.
Great.
What do you make of Kyrie say the media are pawns, and a writer just asked him if he's traded, he's gonna retire, and calls him a puppet. How would you feel as a writer? Were you offended, or maybe nothing? Took it with a grain of salt.
Well, you know, one thing about being a writer covering American pro basketball, I always had that press credential. And I came along in the 80s when that was open range in the NBA. You could go in a locker room and sit down and talk to people. It's become a global sport. When you go to the All-Star game or wherever, it has become such a crush. And this is also due not just to the globalization, but technology has created all of these media outlets, all of these reporters. And it used to be crowded back in the 90s, but it is ridiculous now. And so you don't get, as a reporter, the kind of close view of things a lot of times. Now, certain reporters can get some of that, but it's not like it used to be. It used to be the opportunity, you know, like I said, you could work your way into getting to know people and get information. And so it makes it hard to judge from afar. When you're covering a team, when you're around a team, I don't care what that team is, where it is, you're going to get a better take for the people, the relationships, and how lightheartedly they take things, like Kyrie being Kyrie. And so I don't think it's a very lighthearted time there, but I don't know. As a writer, I would really focus on the fine details of, well, really, how tight are Kyrie and KD? And that's hard information to get. But if you're inside that team like we used to be able to get in the 80s, you could just look at them and see there are always indications. And there's interesting reporting now about the Lakers. You know, you got Westbrook there. He is obviously a great player, but he's sort of the great unbridled force in basketball. And here you got LeBron James. He's not only this great player, he's a coach. He's the general manager. He really is all, and he's the ultimate citizen. He's all these things rolled into one. And he's there in the process now of telling Russell Westbrook, Russ, you got to cut here. You got to do this. You got to do that. You know, and as LeBron confided, they're joined at the hip. he is taking, and they've got all these potential Hall of Famers who will all be, I think, what are 5 or 6 of, I don't know, a bunch of them. I lose count. They got so many. I think the last time we talked, I compared it to the Rolling Stones. It's like an aging rock band, except they're
Yes.
playing basketball.
Exactly.
But the tough one is Russ, because Russ still has it. But if they get him to play defense and really concentrate on, it would be almost like Kobe on the Olympic team, getting him to back off that full agenda, where he's got to be Oscar Robertson or somebody. And that's sort of what they're doing. And the real question is, when does that wear thin? Does it wear thin in the preseason? Does it wear thin by Christmas? Does it wear thin by All-Star break? And we're not even talking about health issues of aging players, because they all, it's a young men's game. And, the Lakers have been through this before, though. Sometimes they get some progress out of it. We'll just see. It's fascinating to see that. And it would be fascinating to have that same look at the Nets.
I think Alvin has a good question here.
Sure.
So, sir, this is being in the news. I think few days, because the deadline, I don't know if it's October 16 there in the US. The deadline for the contract extension, I think, is October 19 here in the Philippines. So there is a news about the Phoenix Suns with DeAndre Ayton. The team don't want to give him the max rookie contract. So obvious reason, not in the level with Luka, Trae Young, and other batchmate. And then there is one particular hint on that scenario that Mikal Bridges is also eligible to get that contract, that $173 million. So do you think, what is the particular reason that Phoenix Suns or other team don't want to give that max contract to a big man? Because Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert is supposedly eligible to sign a super max contract with the Utah Jazz, but they declined. They give him a max contract. So what happening to the NBA now that most of the big men don't have any value?
That's the game they've opted for. And they got stuck in the past. They changed their game, as Coach Tim Cohn explained. They've changed their game. They wanted to get rid of the triangle. They wanted to get rid of system basketball. The NBA's always, from the very first days, in Philadelphia, they had an owner named Eddie Gottlieb. He let Jumpin' Joe Fulks, this hillbilly, with the first jump shot, score 20 points a game, which had never happened. This is in the 1940s. Then along comes Wilt Chamberlain. He plays him for virtually every minute that he could of the season. Only 4 minutes did Wilt Chamberlain sit on the bench. And the reason Eddie Gottlieb did this is because fans came when people scored lots of points. And, it made newspaper headlines. It got the league publicity. Well, those suits sitting around in the marketing offices of the NBA aren't stupid. They know that if they have lots of scoring and they're taking lots of shots and running up and down the floor at top speed, well, their theory is that eventually some defense will adjust, and it is adjusting some. But really what they've done is try to make a lot of money off a lot of scoring, and they've made a lot of money. Now, the COVID has imperiled that. And we just came to an NBA Finals where we saw the mid-range come back in a big way. And, I'm an old school guy. I like it all. I just like a system where you can run what the hell you want. Quit quit messing with the timeline rule. Quit messing with the reset. If you want to get out and run, as Tex Winter often said, in regular basketball, where it's not all regulated to be run and gun. And these teams aren't even really good run and gun teams. The high scoring teams are back in the 60s when they didn't even have a 3-point shot. But my point is, Tex Winter always had a saying, you can hurry to a butt whipping. And those teams, now, Mike D'Antoni is a wonderful guy. I mean it. He's a really good person. But he doesn't believe in post play. And the NBA, although Mike D'Antoni never coached a championship team, they really adopted his philosophy coming off a Golden State's championship in 2015. They were already doing it. And his philosophy was a 2-point shot by a big man is an inefficient shot. We're better off jacking threes, putting the big men on the perimeter to set screens and roll to the basket for dunks. And so it all became a property of the mathematicians, the analytics guys too. Enough already. Let's get back to some mid-range game. A lot of it also has to do with coaches teaching drop steps to kids in the younger leagues so that we rediscover post play. I just don't know if we can overcome the money to get back to that. In some ways we shouldn't. Some of today's game is really good because it frees up the greater athletes, something the Philippines has done for decades. It frees up the true athletes to go and attack. The big man, I think for years in the Philippines, there was not a big man in the game. Am I incorrect there?
Well, right now I think they're slowly being. Well, we do have a big man, but it's not mobile compared to what we're seeing in the international scene.
Right, but the Philippines wasn't leading the way and trying to jimmy the game around to where, I mean, it was just happening naturally in the Philippines. It's rebalancing. I would love to see the big men back, but are they going to, to answer your question, $170 million, it's an incredible amount of money. And, if your rules that you've set up in your game no longer favor big men, why would you want to do that? And the teams that would get in trouble financially would pay money to big men that, they're like the little guys sometimes used to be. And, I don't know where it'll go. It's making progress. The game's very popular. We're talking about it from opposite sides of the globe today. So they're all doing something right. I really did get sort of nauseated with jacking up all the threes, but I'm hoping we actually shoot a fewer threes this season and keep moving back toward team play, the mid-range game, and we actually see a rebirth of post play. Until that happens, I don't see him handing out too many big deals to young post players who really don't have all that good a drop step.
Actually, sir, I have a follow-up on that, sir, because you mentioned 170 million is a big money. I don't know if I can earn that in my lifetime, but
it's hard to earn $1 million in your lifetime.
That's true.
All of us, and we're media people.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine what that means to so many working class families around the globe. We're dealing with ridiculous numbers.
Yes.
actually, sir, I do this episode because I'll always do some topic about the NBA lockout. The NBA lockout, there is a difference some of people asked me to do the PBA, the Philippine Basketball Association topic, but I don't want to do that kind of stuff because there is something, because a lot of information is not revealed on papers or not transparent. But in the NBA, one of the particulars information that the NBA Basketball Player Association have power on their players. And then the expiration of the collective bargain agreement will be expired, I think, 2024, but they can have an option until 2023. On that timeline, 2023 and 24, on the 2025, there will be a new deal, new I think TV network deal. I think triple the prize money. I think 72 billion, 72 billion dollars. And then the one particular thing that they mentioned on that article on the CNBC, that if that agreement happened and the collective bargain agreement renewed, some of the players can have at least $80 million per year, and that is one particular player that can apply for that is Giannis. So, do you think on the 2025 with the renewal of the collective bargain agreement and the new deal, TV deal, which is I think 40 or 70 million dollars, is there possible that one NBA player will have at least $80 million per year or until $100 million per year?
Well, this goes back to that fight in the fall of 1995 between MJ and Steve Kerr in practice, in which MJ knocked the crap out of Steve Kerr. And Steve Kerr was the union representative. And it wasn't just him. MJ had a lot of anger, his father's death, all of this stuff, the fall of 95. But he also had there was a lot of labor stuff going on, and Steve was the labor representative. But, there are two classes. There were two classes then. You had role players that were making light money, and then MJ was the first guy to make 30 million, if I'm not mistaken. And those agents getting there, and all the money interests are involved, and there are divided interests right now. There are guys that are going to get $170 million, and there are guys that are going to get $1 million. And so that's sort of like having the factory workers and the factory owners have a union together. How are you going to work this out? And so I don't think those issues will go away. I don't think somebody's going to punch somebody in practice, but they might, because when you start messing with money, and these are big issues, the NBA learned long ago that it goes back to Eddie Gottlieb keeping Wilt Chamberlain in the game forever, or Jumpin' Joe Fultz getting him lots of shots. You have to have stars to sell tickets. It's why the Lakers do what they do. It is star driven, and that goes against the value. We're teammates. This is a team sport. We're joining together to play this game for each other and for the city and for the fans. And yet you're making this and I'm making this. Well, the star sells the tickets, and the star supposedly delivers victories. Unfortunately, the union structure may say that this guy on this team he's been in the league this amount of time, so he's eligible for this deal. Well, is he really that star that is selling tickets? Where is his jersey, And I think he's an up and coming young player, DeAndre Ayton. Well, I don't even have any idea. But I'm asking, where are his jersey sales? That's sort of how you measure a lot of star power. Somebody pay $80 for your jersey to wear it around. Then that I think that's a good measure of fan buying power, fan interest in some ways. And so we're back to a lot of the issues that trouble society in general. How do we have billionaires who are trust fund babies in America, lots of them. We have other billionaires that are brilliant executives. We have some real hangdogs who have gotten paid hundreds of millions of dollars because they're corporate executives, and they've been terrible corporate executives. They've lost money. And so it's really hard to apply a salary structure to this. But it doesn't mean they're going to stop trying, because those agents and the power brokers are there to corral the money. In American football, it's the quarterbacks who get the money. They're the stars a lot of times. So it's interesting.
Okay. Aldrin? Okay. Okay. For the last question, it's the one that you were expecting me to ask. Why did Ben Simmons suddenly return to Philadelphia, and what's going to happen in your book, Sir Roland?
Well, he returned for the same reasons we were discussing with the previous question. It's a whole lot of money, and he's under contract. Now, my current book's 850 pages, and usually they let me get away with 600-700 page books. They're long books. And but my new publisher doesn't want me to write that long. They have me under contract. I have a lot of things I want to say, and I want the books to be longer.
Yes.
I have the sales, but I'm probably not going to win that. Obviously, he's back because he didn't want to go back there, but he doesn't want to give up all those millions. And so, I don't know. I think these things are hard to carry through a season. And so because they're hard to carry through a season, these kinds of issues, they can take a team with potential. If I'm the guy in Philly, I would, if I were with the Nets, I would take that deal in a minute. I would think that one of the places that Ben Simmons could really fit in and help, and you guys disagree, but I think it's Brooklyn. The Nets, they have firepower. All the other things he brings, suddenly James Harden doesn't have to play point guard all the time. Now, they're still going to lay off him and double team other people, and it's still going to be an issue. And I can't believe that jerk didn't really work on his shot and get better at it, right? Let's face it, that's fundamental basketball.
Yeah.
That's fundamental you got to do, and the great players have gotten better at what they need to get better at. And so that's an issue. But daggone, if I'm the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm not sure I just don't know if I could handle a goofball like Kyrie. Now, they maybe have some way they're going to make that work. Maybe Doc is going to be able, their coach, Doc Rivers, is going to be able to deal with Kyrie. I can't imagine Doc wants that headache.
Yeah.
So they both are sitting there with these, and I could say something smart, like they're both sitting there. I won't say what I was going to say. They're both sitting there with these major issues, and they owe them both lots of money. But if they violate their contracts, they don't owe them lots of money. Normally, you'll do an awful lot for talent. But if it's like Stephen A. Smith, the American broadcaster, said on ESPN the other day, what good is all that talent if you can't trust them? True. And so they both have sort of violated trust in a way. I think Kyrie's violated it much worse. But who knows? How do you deal with them? You hope they they mess up on their contract and you don't have to pay them. That's what I would hope. Anyway, I really have enjoyed taking the time. These are all really good questions. They were challenging for me to answer. And I appreciate all your efforts.
Yes, thank you very much, Sir Roland. And I'm sorry again for the mix-up in the schedule.
Don't worry about it. I do know how many times I was running around yesterday. I had to delay something I was doing. It's life.
Yeah, and thank you for always graciously accepting my invites. Because
Of course, it's great.
And I'm gonna bug you some more.
Doesn't matter. You love to talk basketball.
Yeah. And I'm writing whatever you're saying. You can see it when I am sharing it.
I do, and it's fascinating. You're a busy guy, Brian.
Super. If you only knew.
Well, I do know because I lived that life.
Yeah.
I was driving to games in a Chevette diesel, all over, and in a car that wouldn't even go 60 miles an hour. I went to the 92 All-Star game. I had my credential, but it was just a tough time. I had to sleep in my car. I could go in the games, interview everybody. But we all pay a price.
I know.
We don't get paid NBA money. That's all.
That's true. That's true. Well, and also, it's been a long time since I've been with Sir Henry and Aldrin, and I wanted them to meet you. And they had a lot of questions because Sir Henry is also writing for me in Sports Bytes. That's why at least they have first-hand information.
And I will tell you, it's nice to make the introduction and to have new friends.
Yes.
And thank you for your interest.
Yeah. All right. So, Sir Henry, do you have any last parting words for Sir Roland?
Thank you very much, and hope we can get this interview again, maybe in the near future.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Aldrin? Really enjoyed it. So happy to do it.
Aldrin?
Actually, sir, I think I wait almost 2008, 2001. I don't know, almost 15 years because I'm reading your books on the top floor on one of the, I will tell this the location, bestseller, National Bookstore bestseller on Ortigas. There is a second floor there on the bookstore. All of the books about NBA players, biographies, and sometimes if I have an event, I get bored, I just read. And now I'm talking to the person who wrote those books. So I think that's a bucket list for me and one of my achievements in my life. So thank you very much, Sir Roland.
Well, I'll just tell you, there's nothing more sacred to a writer than readers. But I started out the same position, reading David Halberstam's book, The Breaks of the Game, and Bob Ryan. And, I came in and suddenly got to meet these different people. They became my colleagues in a way. And so I understand that's a great journey, from reading to doing your own writing and research. So, it's as special for me as it is for you. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so before we end this, let's get a group picture because I'm sure that Sir Henry and Aldrin would love this. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right, so that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Stay safe. Stay safe, sir.
Bye now.
In these uncertain times, when health and cleanliness are the most important factors of the day, where germs and viruses are everywhere, when all hope is lost, it's great to know that there's one cleaning company that stands above the rest. Clean Patrol is there for you, to serve you in all your cleaning needs. Clean Patrol designs and caters to your needs, whether you are a big or small business, private home, vehicle, or even post-construction. Clean Patrol has agents ready to serve. So what are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and call now. Operators are standing by. You can also check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Go ahead, tell them Tony sent you.